Hi, Lars. Good to see you.
Good to see you too. Good to see you too.
Thanks for coming for a coffee. So TEDx Luxembourg City presents Coffee with, and in this case, Lars Sudmann. So Lars, if you don't mind, I'll quickly introduce how we came to talking to each other and why you did a TED Talk with us. So I used to run a university in Luxembourg, and at that university, we have a number of teachers that are very, very skilled in their particular field. So we have researchers, but then we also look for, as a business school, people that are very, very experienced in their field. And I was recommended you, and so you came and you were good enough to come and teach one of our courses. And in talking to you, I was constantly inspired by the different things that you were talking about. And it kind of seemed like every time we brought up a subject, you would talk about something from a really inspirational perspective. And I thought, at some point in time, I have to get Lars to come and do a TED Talk. But then I realized you had already done a TED Talk. And so, in fact, you've done a couple of TED Talks. But so I asked you if there was anything particular you wanted to talk about, or that you could talk about that was different. And as usual, you had another completely new idea, and it was absolutely fascinating. It was a book called, it was an idea called the Spaghetti Principle, and it caused quite the impact on me. And of course, I went off and bought your book, and Innovation That Sticks. And in fact, it's because of this book, and it's because of right here, the Nespresso question, what else, that this came about. Because the Nespresso question, if I can just briefly explain that, it's asking the question, what else? And you ask it and you get an answer, and then you ask it again, you get an answer, but you keep asking it. And after the second or third time, you kind of exit the normal answers and you start getting really off the wall type of ideas. And so in doing that with the team, they kept saying, right, what else? What else? And we kept coming up with ideas, and somebody came up with, let's do a coffee with our former speakers. And here we are. So Lars, I'd like to thank you for being the inspiration behind TEDx Luxembourg City Presents Coffee With. But so if I could ask, as opposed to me talking about you, there's nobody who knows you better than yourself. So can I ask you potentially to just describe what you do and in this day and age, other than the book?
Other than the book. Okay, yeah, thank you very much, Dirk, for this one. Great to see and great to hear that that the book and the ideas in there had it brought this here to light. So that's always fascinating to see what the ripple effect, so to speak, of this one. Yeah, just a couple of words. What do I do now? I had some time that I spent in the corporate world, so to speak, exploring innovation, exploring strategy, exploring finance, leadership, and so on. And right about like 10 years ago, I left that field and that trajectory. And I'm now looking from the outside world of what is working in terms of innovation, in terms of leadership. So I work now with a couple of startups as an advisor, but also with large organizations. Like, what does good global leadership look like? And especially, how can you navigate in times of crisis, in times of disruption, and so on. And well, that at the moment is, of course, a very, very interesting period to explore a couple of things, like what works, what doesn't work. I had the now it comes to mind. I've been, that book that you just mentioned and the TEDx talk and so on that we work with is on innovation. For a good time also, I looked a lot at crisis leadership. I was a CFO of Procter & Gamble in 2008. Actually, at my first day on onboarding, on the day that Lehman Brothers collapsed and so on. So somebody came into the door.
What perfect timing.
Yeah, somebody walked in the door. It's like, hey, let's look at the news. That might have an impact on us. And it's like, oh, yeah. And it had a couple of years later. So I'm dusting off some of the learnings that we had from this to try to combine now. What can we learn from in terms of how to deal with innovation? How can we deal with leadership? But also, how can we do that in times of really radical crisis and so on? And that's what I'm doing right now. That's what I'm digging in. That's what I try to research, try to contribute.
So and it's phenomenal, the work that you've come up with and the ideas. And every time I listen to a talk that you deliver, it's almost sort of expanding one on the other. But in terms of innovation, you yourself have so many different innovative ideas. It's wonderful. But so what's happening now? We're in this in this rather, clearly you have experience with a crisis situation in a huge company, but what are you doing now that this pandemic has hit, and what are the consequences, and how are things changing for you?
Yeah, it is quite a situation, isn't it? And nobody has experience with how to deal with. I mean, we're all navigating basically on site, as it's sometimes called. And everybody who tells something different, who knows how to do that, like nobody knows, basically. But I think that going back to what you mentioned there, the spaghetti principle that we also talk about. I think that's what I try to see now. How can we navigate with this? Just if I recap it, what is actually the spaghetti principle of innovation that I recommend people to do?
I can answer the question. You take a whole bunch of ideas, you throw them up against the wall, and you see what sticks. I love that. Just the visual of the spaghetti principle. I absolutely love it.
Absolutely. And for those of you who've never tested that at home, actually you can do that. It's one of the methods to do to see if spaghetti are ready to eat or a bit over ready to eat and so on. So that really, really works. You can try that. That is one thing that you could try at home. Now, where does that come at hand actually is also when you navigate in uncharted waters. We used to explore it a lot, and we used to discuss it a lot in terms of innovation, basically, in terms of digital transformation and so on, that it's very difficult to foresee the future, what works, but you have to throw to the wall of reality, so to speak, and see what sticks. And you continue doing what sticks, and what falls off, well, you stop doing, and you build a process around this and continuously work on that. Now, I think in the times that we live in at the moment, with the pandemic and with drastic changes, just recently, as we've seen, like with charts, US job market charts that we've never seen before, oil price charts that we've never ever seen before.
So just a point of clarity, because I'm not sure precisely when this is going to go out. So I heard yesterday, for the first time in the history, oil companies are paying people. I think they're paying something like $30 a barrel, or somewhere around that, in order for people to take the barrels. It's negative pricing. It's incredible. It's
incredible. We've only seen that from the energy market, and now it's there as well. So totally uncharted waters, and of course very difficult to work on that one. Now, I do think one of the principles for wherever you work, if it's for yourself in your self-leadership, if you have an organization to run, a team that you work, maybe a small business, whatever it is you work, I think the one thing that I would recommend to do, what I do at the moment as well, but what I would recommend everybody to do is to keep that bit of principle of innovation in mind. So what will for sure not work is to continue doing what you've always done, because we're in uncharted waters. I mean, for sure, there's a guarantee for that. What is the right thing to do? What are the right actions for whatever field one is working in? Very difficult to say. But the one thing that I recommend to do is continuously trying out, throwing things at the wall, seeing if it sticks, and then getting very much now, and that's what I do as well. I become my own basically note taker and researcher, so to speak, about this time, because it's so fast changing and so on. But what I try to do right now is really try to adopt, run a lot of like small experiments, see how do they work, what does that do to it, and so on, and really keep track of this one, which not only creates my own little Corona diary, so to speak, of my own experience, but also it hopefully helps me navigate and the companies and so on that I work with navigate these uncharted waters.
So if I may just kind of seize the opportunity and maybe slightly put you on the spot. I know you're always full of ideas, so I'm sure you'll have one here. The idea now of everything becoming virtual, you know, we're in a world where leaders need to, so managers and supervisors and bosses of any type, but obviously the good ones are leaders. So leaders need to create sort of this virtual cyber leadership, this virtual leadership scenario. Yeah. What's, and I guess that's something that's very new for most people. I'm sure there are a couple of companies out there that have been doing this a while, but what are your observations? If I were to flip through your diary, your Corona diary, what your notes, what would I find there about virtual leadership?
Well, one of the things you will find is something that I've learned. I've led a couple of virtual teams already in the pre-Corona time, so to speak. So I had this experience all of a sudden of this. So where is everybody? So nobody's sitting in the office with me, but they were dispersed all the time. One of the things, for example, that I came across is something that also there has been now a research term for it, which is called the passive FaceTime bias of leaders. Now that's quite a mouthful. What is passive FaceTime bias? Well, it is active FaceTime is what we are doing right now. Basically, we have active FaceTime with each other. Passive FaceTime is what happens in a face-to-face environment, in a large office and so on. People walk around and see what others are doing without exchanging with them. It's like, oh, that person is in a negotiation at the moment. Seems to be going fine and so on. In a virtual environment, that doesn't happen. So you don't have that, what is called passive FaceTime. And what research has shown, like quite extensively, is that people actually, the more they see others passively, the more they favor it, the more they think like, oh, that person is doing a good job. Now, what leaders are now faced with is a scenario where, well, sometimes they sit in a video conference, in a Zoom conference, whatever is the tool that they have, or they sit behind their desks and send out some emails. But you don't have, all of a sudden, you have a reshift of this one. You don't connect maybe that much anymore, or maybe you connect a lot, but you definitely connect differently. And one of the things that I think the great virtual leaders also do is really to take a step back and really think like, well, you know, interaction, and especially that passive interaction, doesn't happen naturally anymore, but I have to make a switch and do it proactively. Right. So what I do right now is, and that doesn't come naturally, because if you work in the same office, you walk to the water cooler, the coffee machine, you just meet somebody and you say, hey, how's it going? And so on. Okay, great. But that doesn't happen anymore. But what I think great leaders do, and that's one of the things you will find in the Corona diaries, is to really think proactively, who do I reach out to today? And without like being on their toes like every 5 minutes and so on, but maybe like, hey, can I proactively reach out? Can I have a quick chat? And so on. And doing these kind of like quick interactions and encouraging these kind of interactions, one of the cornerstones of actually great virtual team cultures.
Yeah, that's remarkable. And by the way, I knew you'd have something. So sorry for putting you on the spot, but I'm not sad I did it, because clearly it got some amazing nugget of information there. As personally, I'm introverted. I find that it is incredibly easy at this stage to just kind of withdraw, which for me is actually, it's my nature. So I will withdraw, and I can find myself in a day not reaching out to anybody and be quite perfectly content. So I really needed to force myself to reach out and discuss with people. And actually, it's one of the reasons why I'm really enjoying doing this, because I am getting out and seeing people. And in fact, from your book as well, the 70-20-10 ratio of, you know, surrounding yourself with certain people and then reaching out to new people. So that 10% of trying to find new people to meet with, that's another initiative that I took called TED Circles, where we bring strangers together to talk about a TED Talk. And it's wonderful, the kind of people that I'm meeting through this platform of TED Circles. It's really, and it's incredible how you can make a connection with somebody when you avoid small talk. When you talk about something truly meaningful, it's insane how deep you can get. Lars, just sort of on a final note then, what is, and this is going to be a difficult one for you, because there are so many things I know that you want to tell people and so many ideas you have to want to get out there. If there was just one message today, so just at the end of this, we've got an audience watching, what's the one thing that you would want people to know at this point, just as a finishing of this interview? Okay.
Well, there are many things, but there's one thing that stands out, and especially at the beginning of this was one thing that I immediately looked at as well. And what is that? Well, some time ago, when things weren't going so well for me as well, I started to paint a little picture to have a little reminder of myself. I once heard, it's maybe an apocryphal story and so on, of King Solomon was asked, like, he asked one of his jewelers to, like, make me a ring with the wisest word to the world, something that is always true. But you can have only 5 words. So the ring maker and so on worked on it, thought on it and so on, and finally came up with the 5 words and put them on this ring that King Solomon then wore again. And it's 5 words in English right now, so I use it as a story and so on for this. What were these 5 words? Well, these 5 words that are always true in good times and in bad times, but especially also in bad times. I then took and painted myself into this and have it in my office as well. And these 5 words are, and this too shall pass. I painted this once in the more difficult times, and I always to look at this one, but this is because this is true in good times. Well, they might pass as well, but also the bad times, they might pass. They might pass as a bad gallstone, but they pass, basically. Also, this will change. And I think for me, when this really difficult phase of the pandemic started, basically that was one painting that I, in my office now, have very, very prominently standing and to look at this one. And I think that is something that is difficult also in the phase where we're recording this, of course, to think about like what is happening in this future and so on. But something to keep in mind of, like, also this will pass at one stage and so on. Yeah. And I think that is an old piece of so to speak, wisdom and philosophy, but I think like that is something to look at from time to time and to keep in mind as well when all the news and so on hit us here.
Fantastic. Lars, you never disappoint. Brilliant. Thank you very, very much. And thanks for taking the time to join me for a coffee. And hopefully we'll talk very, very soon.
Hope so too. Thanks so much. It was a pleasure.
All the best. Bye-bye.
Thank you.